And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to continue on with the list of players that have the most to prove. So we stopped with the Kings, and now we're going to move on with San Antonio. Now, the Spurs, I have Keldon Johnson as a player that needs the most to improve. Obviously, Victor has already shown that he is going to be the face of the Spurs. I don't really think there's anything more that Victor needs to improve on because he's still a rookie and he's going to improve on it later on in the seasons. We saw how he played in the Olympics. He led his team to the silver medal and he's looking for gold. He's on a mission. He wants vengeance, yada, yada, yada. Everybody knows. He was fantastic. So clearly, Victor doesn't need any more improvement than already needs. Keldon Johnson does. The Spurs, they plotted their 2023-2024 path around making life as easy as possible for their top pick, Victor Wembanyama. Part of that process is involving, it's involved in decreasing Keldon Johnson's floor time because, Victor needs a lot more time on the floor because Victor is just that good. And between October and December, he made 26 starts, averaged 32 minutes, but from January to April, those numbers dropped to just 27 respectively. So he only played 27 games and then played 27 minutes. So Johnson is a relentless scorer, but his consistency is not really his strength. And that's really a problem for a lot of people on the Spurs. They're very inconsistent. The Spurs could live with his lows in hopes he'd have more highs when there wasn't much else brewing in Alamo City, but they need more reliability now that they have a franchise focus, and the ideal wing slot alongside Wembanyama is a better shooter and defender than Johnson has been. So he sort of has to prove that he can fill in that role of being a good three-point shooter and a defender to complement Victor Wembanyama. Realistically, as of right now, the offensive mind for the Spurs should be to give Victor the ball, everybody get out of the way, or with Chris Paul now that they have, run a pick and roll, let them run the pick and roll, and throw the ball up and see if Victor can catch it. Because he is so much taller than everybody else, and he's so much taller than a majority of the centers, while still being versatile enough to rotate on defense, that he can legitimately do everything on the court. And catching lobs over taller defenders, it doesn't even have to be a lob. Just get him under the basket. He can catch it he can put his hand above his head. No one is going to be able to reach him. And then he can just dunk the ball in. It's literally like a video game. It's so ridiculous. You guys know, and here's a little bit more of a realistic one if you guys don't really play video games, but you guys know those little kid hoops that the little kids play basketball on with a pretend ball and not a real basketball, but it's a ball that the kid can shoot. Think of that, and that's Victor Wembanyama in every single basketball game if he's utilized properly. So that should be the offensive mind for the Spurs, in my personal opinion. Again, it's just there's way more to it than that, obviously, because there's way more of a physical gift to that. And it's way more I'm sure that defenses are going to figure out a way to stop it eventually. But as of right now, I don't know if people will really be able to have the facilities to stop that kind of pick and roll and stop that kind of move, getting Victor underneath the basket. It was such a common thing for the Spurs. There are so many clips of Victor just running to the basket. He'll have what's not open for most is open for him. But most of his teammates just wouldn't throw the ball up to him and try to allow him to make a play. So maybe if he brings something to the offense, not only is it going to make things easier for their teammates, but it's also going to make things easier for him and for Victor. He's only 24 years old, and he's been productive he's been rather productive, averaging 18 points over the past 3 seasons. That's usually a solid keeper for a future-focused team. So there's a chance that he could factor into the long-term plans. He has good defensive stretches and even has pretty decent shooting. He shot 2 threes per game and averaged 39% from them, but then again, it's only 2 threes per game. So talent is there. There just needs to be more consistency and more reliability. Next player on this list plays for the Toronto Raptors, and that is RJ Barrett. Now, RJ Barrett played pretty well for Canada in the Olympics, but now we have to see him do that in the NBA at an NBA level. After committing to a youth movement this past season, the Raptors have spent this summer cementing their young core. And more specifically, they gave the versatile forward Scotty Barnes a max extension, and they signed Emmanuel Quickly, to a 5-year, $175 million deal. So RJ Barrett has a chance to prove that he is worth one of the Raptors' huge contracts during the 2024-2025 season. If he plays like he did after the December trade that sent him to Canada, then it shouldn't really be a problem, because in 32 games, he averaged 21 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, while also averaging 55% from the field, 39% from 3, and 62% from the free throw line. Free throw shooting's a little bit weird, like what in the world is that all about? But other than that, fantastic production. The potential holdup for this man, however, is sample size, because it wasn't really that many games. 32 games is not a huge deal of games to put up those numbers. And the partial season spent in Toronto was great, but the 4-season run that he had with New York was not so great. He averaged 18 points, 5 rebounds, 2.8 assists on 42% shooting, 34% shooting, and 70% shooting. So we're going to have to see, because those averages that I just read, that could just be what RJ Barrett is. We're not entirely sure, therefore, given the fact that the sample size isn't really that much. And because who knows, maybe he'll play much better if he's playing with his home in Toronto, like his home team. So that could be an argument, but again, we still have no idea, because it was only a couple of games and it only recently the trade happened. So because of that, we have to wait and wait and wait. And while we're waiting, we can move on to the next person on the Utah Jazz, who is Keyonte George. Now, Keyonte George, he played pretty well as a rookie and really skyrocketed expectations. Now, amongst rookies, this man, I believe, was the only rookie to ever lead rookies in stats whose name wasn't Victor Wembanyama last season. Now, for those of you who didn't understand what I just said, Victor led every single statistical category in both averages and in totals last season for rookies. He led in points, he led in rebounds, he led in steals, he led in blocks. Every single stat that you can count, he led in the averages and he led in the totals. The only one that he didn't lead in was in assists. And this guy was leading in assists. So props to him. He was able to lead the rookies in averaging something and in totals for something in a category that Victor was just completely dominating. Like, it was crazy, because people would look at Victor dominating every single list, dominating in points, rebounds, blocks, steals, all of those, and they would think, oh, that's not Rookie of the Year, which is kind of crazy. But that's a completely different conversation. So, Keyonte has the opportunity to become a real star in this league, according to Jazz coach Will Hardy. And George's upside is admittedly, according to this article, tantalizing, whatever that means. His off-dribble creation for himself and his teammates opens the door to some really high-end outcomes. And then again, it's tough to really bill him as the key to the offense of this team when he's shooting 39% from the field, 33% from 3, and 84% from the line. And couldn't double up really his turnovers with his assists, unfortunately. Now, again, I'm pretty sure. Now, he is in an early stage of his development that you don't want to really overreact to the highs and the lows that he brings to the roster. So there's still room to grow for him, which is really the most important thing. And if there's room to grow, that means that you can improve easily. Now, finally, Washington. Alexander Sarr, easily going to be the player with the most to prove. He had one of the worst summer league performances that we've ever seen coming in from a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. And he shot a lot of bricks. In the summer league, he shot 9 for 47, which is awful. And not only that, he doesn't really space the floor out that well regardless, considering how he's a center. And Washington may not have drafted him for his shooting, but they can't afford to have a space killer either for the team. So this could end up being like two things. He could be a huge bust, or this summer league is just a fluke. I think the summer league is a bit of a fluke, but his performances in the summer league, they were not great. They were not good at all. There was a game where he went like 0 for 15 or something like that, or 0 for 11. I don't remember what it is, but he did not hit a single shot, and he missed every single one of them, and he built the house, which is bad as the number 2 pick. You do not want to build houses as the number 2 pick. That's not your job. But aside from that, no idea how he's going to really play. So we have to see how he develops. And if it translates over to the regular season, Washington might be in huge trouble. And it's kind of ironic, because I thought that Alexander Sarr should have been the number 1 pick in the draft, and it should have been the Hawks should have. It should have been the player that the Hawks should have tried to acquire, but they just chose not to for some reason. But we'll see whether it'll backfire for the Hawks or whether they dodged a bullet. But yeah, those are the players that have the most approved on this list, and that's the end of that list. But that's not the end of this segment. That's not the end of this podcast. We still have one more segment to go, and that segment is going to be talking about the 76ers and their status on whether or not they're moving to New Jersey or whether or not they're not moving to the New Jersey. I have an update. I'm going to reveal it to you guys in the 5th segment, so be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.